Several players in the Namibian housing market have welcomed the move by the Bank of Namibia to scrap the deposit payment for second-time homeowners or those who want to buy houses for the second time, saying the move was long overdue. This essentially means that those attempting to acquire their second property will simply have to make sure that they service their premiums without putting down a security deposit for their mortgages. The question begs, though, what does this mean for aspiring first-time homeowners? Will they ever be considered, or does this only benefit those that already have their property? Join us on the conversation this Thursday as we unpack this issue on 95.3 FM and on the Namibians Facebook platform at quarter.
After the hour of 1 o'clock, good afternoon. How are you? Of course, you are officially now listening to the conversation right here on 95.3 FM. My name is Kelvin Chiringa. We want to break bread on a very important topic. Several players in the Namibian housing market have welcomed now the decision by the Bank of Namibia to scrap deposit payments for second-time homeowners, saying the move was long overdue. This means those acquiring their second property will simply have to service their premiums without putting down a security deposit for their mortgages. However, a question now that stands out is, will aspiring homeowners ever be considered in this particular regard? Now, to unpack the impact of this, we are joined by Heinrich Amushila, co-director of the Namibia Housing Action Group. Mr. Amushila, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Kelvin, and good afternoon to the listeners.
Thank you so much. And of course, we are also joined by economist Salomo Hei. Good afternoon, Mr. Hei.
Good afternoon, Kelvin, and good afternoon to your listeners.
That's right. And once again, we are joined by Mr. Herbert Jaunch, who is a labor research expert right here in Namibia. Mr. Jaunch, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for the invitation.
That's right. I should say that Mr. Hei is supposed to quickly go for an equally important engagement. I would like to start with you, Mr. Hei, so that we can clear this. We do have, of course, 8 minutes with you there. From the standpoint of an economist, what impact might this decision have on the stability of the housing market? And is this a welcome move, especially for homeowners or aspiring homeowners?
Yeah, well, look, I think the regulatory framework in which the Bank of Namibia operates is really to safeguard the financial system, right? And one must understand some of the decisions. I think what initially prompted the initial decision was that the regulatory framework wanted to curtail what they perceive to be a speculative nature of investors in the market, right? Where those that had access would then buy property, and through that they would keep new homeowners out of the market, right? That was the thinking at the time. I had a different view, and I still have a different view. And that's why, in my view, I think this particular move is welcomed. And I'll tell you why. The inability for first-time homeowners not to afford houses is not a decision of the central bank.
Right.
The decision of first-time homeowners not to be able to afford houses is an affordability issue, right? They simply cannot afford houses, right? And let me tell you that the price of bricks, right, is the price of bricks.
Right.
The price of is the price of cement, right? The only variable that you have in that equation is the price of land, right? And the price of land, if it becomes affordable, and affordable to every citizen who's got a substantive income,
right,
you will be able to access a housing bond, right? Because that we are paying for the land, and you put on how much we're paying for houses per square meter,
right,
it becomes completely unaffordable for if it were for an entry market level. I mean, a 1 million house for a first-time home owner, I think it's on the higher end.
So in other words, Mr. Hei, are you saying that the decision that has been taken now by the Apex Bank is actually taking part of the burden off the back of homeowners?
No. What I'm saying is that if we can make sure we speak to the affordability of the variable in the housing prices, which is land, right? We will be able to unlock more accessibility to housing for first-time owners. Yes. So I don't understand. I know that the conversation says, is the bank's decision right or wrong?
Right.
Right. Remember what I said initially. The initial decision was to curb speculative investors on the housing market. That's why they said if you're buying a second house, it means that you are speculating and you're an investor, and subsequently you must pay more. Right.
Right.
But that doesn't address the inability for a first-time homeowner to afford a house. Because remember, the first-time owner cannot afford a house because their income simply cannot afford where the price of the houses are.
That's right.
And the price...
Yes. Allow me to just bring in Mr. Heinrich there. Mr. Heinrich,
yes.
What do you think about this decision that has been taken by the Bank of Namibia? And would you want to add to what Mr. Hei is saying there?
Okay. Well, my specialization is more in the low-income categories, but the decision by Bank of Namibia, it's a welcome move. I think it will help to grow the economy, but also depends on a number of second home buyers that will purchase homes. We hope that with more buyers buying homes, it will grow the economy. Will then have more resources to assist the other income levels that cannot afford homes.
That's all right. I would like to bring in Mr. York, but for the sake of Mr. Hay, we're supposed to immediately be released and go to other duties there. We only have got 2 minutes, Mr. Hay, with you. Is there anything that the bank can do to go beyond this so that they come closer to the main problem here, as you say, affordability?
Well, I think the affordability issue, remember that the land is owned by local government.
Right.
Right? So there need to be a conversation between local government and perhaps the central bank, right? To say the current price for land, whether it's service or unserviced, is that perhaps not the reason why the first time homeowners cannot afford houses? So if we bring down the price of land, potentially the price of the whole house could substantially come down lower.
Right.
And then you could have an entrance of new homeowners in the market they would be able to afford. So I'm not saying that the decision is wrong. I'm saying that there could be another measure to actually get first-time homeowners into the affordability bracket.
That's right, Mr. Hay. We will let you go at this point, but we do appreciate really your insightful contribution to this conversation. And of course, we're looking forward to engaging with you more on this one. That's right. All right. That's Mr. Hay there that we've just released. Of course, he's supposed to go to other, of course, equally pressing businesses. I would like to come to you, Mr. York. You were listening to this gentleman as they just started off there. Has the Bank of Namibia fallen short of what we expect of them to do if it comes to taking the burden off, especially those that aspire to own houses?
Absolutely. And I actually don't quite agree with what Mr. Hay was saying.
Right.
Because the question of land prices is just one aspect of housing. And we've seen over the years massive speculative housing prices emerging. And we've seen people not only buying a second property, but sometimes 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 10, 12 people, an individual. Now, when that happens, you create a shortage of the housing stock. People move into the city, but the wealthy are already taking hold of a large percent of the stock market. Because house prices are completely unregulated in Namibia, we leave them to market forces. So when the rich buy up houses, it drives up the prices for everyone. Mr. Hay is absolutely right. Land is part of that equation. But when you look at opportunities for housing construction, there are different models, there are different materials available. We have the Shack Dwellers Federation of Namibia that has shown how, through kind of communal ownership and savings groups, houses can be built at a very different level.
Right.
But for middle-income people who take bank loans to acquire housing, they are left really at the mercy of the bank. Number one, the interest rates that banks charge. And I think the statistics told us that about half of the profits made by commercial banks in Namibia is made of housing loans. Now, that tells you how they really squeeze homeowners. Secondly, when someone loses the job, and in our labor market where there's such high level of vulnerability and so little job security for most, you've paid maybe 10, 15 years of your housing bond every month, then you lose your job. The next thing, the bank comes and repossesses, takes your house, auctions it off, and keeps all the proceeds. So when you not only lose your house, you also lose the payments that you made all those years.
Right.
And there, I think, the Bank of Namibia has really failed homeowners to protect them and people who take bank loans for their house. And housing is a basic need. But there are, of course, many Namibians who don't even qualify for a bank loan.
Right.
Their incomes is so low. So we need a mix of housing models to make sure that people acquire adequate and decent housing.
In other words, are you saying that the decision that has been taken by the Bank of Namibia is really a bourgeois decision? It's not a decision that has got any impact at all when it comes to the lower middle income, to the lower class of our society?
Absolutely. Because who can buy a second home? You're looking at the top 10% of the population.
Mr. Heinrich, I would like to put you in there. This intervention is really for the rich and those that can afford. For those that cannot afford, they are not welcome here. This does not affect them at all. Your response to that?
Yes, I think we still have a large margin of the population that cannot afford housing at the moment, most especially the low income. And then there are also middle income like police officers, nurses, and correctional officers. Lately, we have been supporting middle income groups to form groups so that they can acquire land that they can service themselves.
Right.
So bring down the price of land. So I think we would want the Bank of Namibia also to go to such an intervention that can reach out to the majority of those ones who cannot afford housing at the moment.
That's right. Mr. York, you have got experience with the international community and how it operates, especially in Latin America. Historically, is there any proof that has really suggested that central banks are really there for the poor?
Well, it depends, of course, depend on the orientation of government. So after the Cuban Revolution, for example, Che Guevara became the governor of the Central Bank of Cuba. In such a scenario, it turned it around from elite interest to servicing the poor. That was very clearly an intention. So with a political orientation and with the people to appoint that are appointed, and of course with a broader economic policy that moves away from dictates of the market and elite interests all the time, you can intervene. Now, today, the Namibian reported the governor of the Bank of Namibia saying banks are there for profit and we must let them pursue their profit motive. Now, of course, that's all they do. But government has a responsibility to protect those dependent on banks, for example, in the form of home loans, from being grossly exploited. And I think this is the point where the bank has fallen short, that the Bank of Namibia is not taking steps to limit the profitability. And that would not be now a revolutionary step. You don't put banks out of business, but you limit the profits they can make. And that would, in my view, be the very least government needs to do. On the broader question that you raised, the question of how people in low incomes, which is the vast majority in Namibia, can afford housing, we need to move away from the bank-sponsored housing model altogether. And internationally, we've seen countries like Uruguay with workers' cooperatives. We've seen in Venezuela also community self-driven initiatives. In Namibia, we have the Shack Dwellers Federation, and Heinrich can talk more about that. These are initiatives that take housing away from the bank and market-driven model and make housing accessible to far more people. And I think that's a very, very important initiative here. But the Bank of Namibia still has an obligation to curb the excessive profiteering that commercial banks make out of housing loans of middle-income earners who take a loan to finance their house.
That's right, Mr. Amushila. The banks must put the central bank, as the captain of the banking sector, must put a leash on the excessive profiteering of the banks there. We know for sure that there is an endeavor now by the lawmakers to try to rein in on the banks when it comes to charges. We have seen some lawmakers a few days ago saying that we need to squeeze the banks so that they do not continue to profit so much at the expense of our people. Do you think this is the right way to go? And do you think that that is going to be possible here in Namibia to control and to squeeze banks to that particular degree?
Yes, I think any intervention that will assist the Namibian nation to, I think, to have to lessen the burden, on the Namibians. It will really assist the nation. We have seen a no cash deposit fees being exempted, especially when we had many problems when our groups go and save. Then they were charged cash deposit fees. So I think this was waived, and it is really assisting our people to and they are encouraged to save.
That's
so
right.
Also, I followed also the discussion at the level of Parliament, where parliamentarians are concerned the way banks are charging their clients. I think that is really not that is a very good step in the right direction.
That's right.
We have our parliamentarians speaking out.
That's right. And what we've also seen this particular week, and if it's not last week or this week, we have seen Bank Vindo coming out to say that we are actually increasing and expanding on the benefits of our women, especially that are on maternity leave. At the same time, the National Assemblies are now holding this motion on introduction of the paternity leave and also increasing the benefits of women who are pregnant. And Bank Vindo, being a Namibian bank, taking that particular initiative has been celebrated. The other banks that have not done that, these are banks that come from outside the country. One would say Bank Windhoek is trying to be as patriotic as possible here, responding to Namibians as a Namibian juristic person. Do you think that even if we are to have a reconfiguration of the default settings in terms of the orientation of Namibia, let's say we are to have a socialist orientation, and then we begin to control banks in that particular manner, as you say, as happened in Cuba there, will we have these banks still operating here in Namibia, or will we be scaring them off? Do you think that that can only happen if we are to be having indigenous banks in Namibia owned by Namibians in the private space?
Well, the proposals that I've mentioned that could be done immediately would have nothing to do with the socialist or revolutionary one. So it's very different from Cuba. Also in Uruguay, it's not part of a socialist revolutionary program. But what we look at in Namibia is and that would be, what I've mentioned so far would be purely reformist steps to say there must be a bit of a balance to protect those who take the bank loans from the endless profiteering. And this endless profiteering and this inequality has reached levels that are totally unsustainable. So if the banks now would be told there are certain regulations that limit your amount of profiteering, they wouldn't run away because they still would be very wealthy. If we'd go, and at the moment we have absolutely no political indication or no political will to do that. If we'd say we put a spanner in the wheels of finance capital that makes such enormous profits and leaves very little, and compared to the profits they make, even Bank Windhoek, granting maternity leaves and offering a few benefits to their staff, is in no way balancing the enormous profitability they make. The profits of the finance sector as a whole, even globally, is extremely worrying, and it's a sector that has run out of control. That controls then indirectly many other parts of the economy. So we have an enormous concentration of economic power and wealth in the hands of banks. in my personal view, that needs to be tackled as well. But our discussion today is just about regulations to make some amendments. But the global control of finance capital over the global economy, which leads to an increasing concentration of wealth in the hand of the few, and levels of inequality that have been unmatched, that are absolutely perverse by now. I think this is a political discussion that must happen as well. Although today's topic is more confined and looks more narrowly at the question of housing.
I still allow you to digress, and I want to come back to you. Maybe if you can just hold on to this conversation. We will not forget that the 2009-2008 global collapse was caused by the banking sector, primarily in the United States of America. I would like to know whether at all, in terms of regulation, we have improved at a global level. We have leashed them a little bit better than we were doing before 2009 in 2008. But Mr. Amushila, if I can come back to you there, do you think that even though we are saying that the Bank of Namibia is falling short of coming to the actual problem itself of affordability, do you think that still this intervention that has been put across should also apply to aspiring homeowners that want to have their very first home?
Yes, I think the main question here is to address, to bring the needs of the people to the table, so that banks can Namibianize their operation, so that it can cater for the real poor of the poorest, and also to grow the market.
Right. That's right.
Otherwise,
yes.
Otherwise, with banks operating the South African way, it can never address the needs of the people. So people will remain poor, and the economy will not really grow.
That's right. Have you observed a greater degree of humanity on the part of the financial sector, the banking sector here in Namibia, dominated especially by banks that come from South Africa? Have you noted any sense of patriotism here? Well, there are lawyers like Richard Metcalf that have been and that are representing a lot of people that have lost their homes, whose homes are being repossessed, and they've been talking about banks must be patriotic. The interventions which they are putting in South Africa to assist the people there who are at risk of losing their homes should also be implemented here in Namibia, even though they come from South Africa. Have you noted any element of patriotism on the part of the banks itself, or they are just mere capitalists who don't understand the language of patriotism at all?
Okay, we are supported by two banks. They provide finance for us so that we can contribute to our fund, to Hangana Fund, to construct houses. Standard Bank is one of the banks that is spearheading the initiative called Buy a Brick Project.
Right.
And that initiative is really assisting the poor of the poorest to build houses. And that's not a cost recovery. It's a grant that is provided to the Federation. And also FNB provide a grant of 1 million annually. I think in terms of the low income, we have that gesture from the banks.
So there is a sense of patriotism and humanity on their part, you say?
Yes.
It's there.
Yes.
Okay, that's right. The time is 17 minutes to go to 2 o'clock right here on The Conversation. You are listening to 95.3 FM. My name is Kelvin Chiringa there. Of course, we are breaking bread on this particular question here. Will aspiring homeowners ever be considered in this particular regard? Where, of course, several players in the Namibian housing market have welcomed now the decision by the Bank of Namibia to scrap deposit payments for second-time homeowners. And we are saying, but what about first-time homeowners? Why is this not also not being extended to them? I would like to take you back to the 2009 Great Recession. Of course, it's a catastrophe that played out in the global economy, affecting a lot of economies. But it came all the way from the United States of America, caused by the banking sector. Beyond 2009, have we seen any improvement in regulation on the part of governments right across the world so that banks can be more receptive to the needs of countries and do not continue to be profit-seeking corporates that sometimes carry out certain decisions that are so catastrophic on our economies?
There were superficially some changes in regulations to avoid that kind of repeat, but the essence wasn't tackled at all. And even at the height of the crisis, what was interesting is how the Western governments were rallying and throwing billions of dollars at the problem to save a system. And some banks were even offered, look, we bail you out, but then you need to cut your top executives' salaries a little, or no bonuses. And some of these banks had the audacity to say, no, we will not accept it. So despite having caused this catastrophic meltdown that has affected so many people losing their homes and their livelihoods in disarray, the top felt, well, with public funds, we bail out private finance institutions. But once they make the profit again, the private institutions keep them. They don't pay it back to the public sector who bailed them out. Governments bailed out private banks. But the private banks, once they used the money and returned to full profitability, they didn't find any need to pay back. And in fact, it wasn't even given as a conditional bailout.
Right.
In many cases, it was done, look, we can't afford that this banking system collapses. And it was based largely on speculative investments and even selling of loans to others for additional profit. So it's a profiteering that has nothing to do with the real economy any longer, but it was a bubble that grew and grew and grew and one day then exploded. Now, that system hasn't been fundamentally changed. And I feel even what we hear now, like the buy a brick project and so on, all good and well, but it's a tiny fraction of what the banks are making.
Right.
So they're giving basically a few crumbs off the table. It's not the bulk of the resources and the bulk of the profits they make. And that is an indication that we haven't actually skipped around the real problem. And it was almost saying, oh, it was a glip somehow, but luckily government bailed us out. When there's poverty, when people die, you see no government in the world throwing such amounts of money at a problem like it was at that time, bailing out the banks.
That's all right. And there are records that say that it was about the time that Barack Obama was also becoming president. And he was saying, no, gentlemen, we need to discipline the banking sector. And he actually called for a meeting of the top executives in the biggest banks in America. But then it is said that when he met these executives, his tone changed and he became more warmer than he was when he was, speaking in public there. Mr. Amushila, I would like to come back to you there. Is it easy to control banks? Do you think banks cannot really be controlled at the degree, or are they being regulated at the degree at which we really want them to be regulated? More needs to be done. What do you think? I'm asking this question because the Bank of Namibia governor said they should be allowed to make profits.
Yes. As we know, banks are operating on a business principle, but business principle must also address the needs of the people. So it's right for the Bank of Namibia to regulate commercial banks, but in such a way that these services are affordable to the people and are really addressing cross-cutting issues like poverty, youth employment, youth empowerment programs, and so on.
That's right. Of course, that's the conversation right here on Desert Radio. You can also give us a call so that we can hear from you what you make of this intervention by the Bank of Namibia to scrap deposit payments for second-time homeowners, saying the move was long overdue. The question is, should this also apply to first-time homeowners there? Coming back to you, Mr. York, people have lost houses. The COVID-19 situation put people in a very difficult space. They could not afford to service their loans. A number of those people have been losing their homes right now. The Bank of Namibia said we cannot do anything because the Justice Ministry is coming up with some interventions from a legal perspective to try to see if the issue of repossession can be solved once and for all. And we are yet to see the implementation of such measures from the Justice Ministry. What do you make of that?
It's long overdue, and we shouldn't have waited for COVID because we had such cases all the time. And we must remember in Namibia, only a minority of jobs are permanent. But you miss your housing loan payments for a few months and you're in big trouble. Then the repossession looms. So the kind of economic scenario in the country that people were facing and the rules that allowed banks, number one, unilaterally to charge these high interest rates, number two, to repossess after a very short period of time, and number three, and that's for me the most shocking way, to say even when they take your house, they don't even have to pay you back what you paid them.
Right.
They keep your house and your money. And this is like a triple burden. So someone losing their house loses also all these payments made over all the years. And that's, I think, where the Justice Ministry, government as a whole, should have long stepped in to protect. It's a question of consumer protection. It's a question of social justice as well. And if we understand housing as a human right and as a basic human need, then we needed to do something like that. So it's quite disappointing that we took 33 years to now discuss finally a law. But we need to step on the toes of the banks. There is no way you can do that and they would applaud you and say, well done, and continue like that. This little step now of no deposit for second homeowners, that doesn't bother the banks at all, because they know if people can't pay for whatever reason, we can always take the house. So the banks never lose. And this is, for me, the terrible thing. The financial sector, not only in Namibia, globally, is orchestrated and set up in a way the bank always wins. If I can continue paying my housing loan, they win, because maybe the housing loan was initially $500,000, but over the years I paid them 3 to 4 million when you consider all the interest. So they win. If I can't pay, they win possibly even more, because they keep what I paid so far and they get the house and they auction it off. And so the system is set up that the rich and powerful, in this case commercial banks, always win. And for politicians to realize that only now, after 33 years, is for me also a bit late to the party. But better late than never, one would say.
That's right.
If at least this is being debated and something substantial is done. And banks are enormously powerful. You hinted at that. If they say we declare Namibia an unsafe investment destination, the mining sector has tried that and successfully prevented an increase in taxes, corporate taxes in the mining sector. So global capital, and let's not be naive, our banks are not local. Not even Bank Windhoek. They are linked in a global network of a finance system. And it's become so powerful, and they own so much of the rest of the economy, which, because of their high levels of profitability, they own parts of the mining industry, they own part of manufacturing industry, car industry, and so on. They are hugely powerful. You're dealing with a real global capital elite.
They will be called capitalist octopuses in Latin America. I'm sure you're aware of that balance. But I would like to come to you, Mr. Amushila. Do you think this is where the problem is? We are dealing with banks that are not Namibian juristic persons here. Fundamentally, these banks are not Namibian banks. Do you think that even though we are still left with the bitter test of the collapse of SME Bank, there is still a need for Namibia to have homegrown banks that are owned by Namibians, whether in the public or the private space?
Yes, as I said, we need to a Namibianize economy that should run together with having our own bank that can really look into our market, can support our market. But the biggest question is the competition between the foreign banks and the Namibian banks.
Right.
How will this affect the nation? Will the Namibian bank survive this stiff competition?
Are we being pessimistic there, Mr. York?
No, just realistic.
Do you think that the state can actually come in and bankroll an ideally private-owned Namibian bank?
Not in the current setup.
Right.
Because the larger commercial banks will find ways of swallowing up the smaller ones. And that's what we see in the global economy happening as a whole, that the big corporations, they swallow up the small ones.
We had eBank at some point. I don't know if you remember eBank. I don't know whether it was wholly Namibian owned, but I know for sure there were some Namibians involved there. And eBank was taken over by some big bank, and we don't see it anymore.
Precisely. Insurance companies, manufacturing places taken over by banks because they make such huge profits. They have financial muscle to temporarily create a condition where they maybe don't make huge profits, but they drive the competition out of the market. And then they have control again. So it's classical kind of monopoly capital behavior that we see with the banks. To deal with them overall is a huge challenge and can't be done in just one country. But in terms of regulations and protecting consumers, that can be done immediately. And I think this is where we, in our debate, we need to understand there are some kind of reforms, if you like, that can be done right away.
Right.
But there are also some bigger challenges that need to be looked at when we deal with banks as like holders of economic power.
That's right. 5 minutes to go to 2 o'clock. I'm just about to, in the next few minutes, release my guest right here on Desert Radio. Mr. Amushila, are you being consulted as a stakeholder, as a player in this domestic economy by the lawmakers? Are you looking forward to being consulted by the lawmakers as they debate now how best they can rein in on the commercial banks here in Namibia so that they can be more responsive than they are right now? Do you think the conversation and the debate also needs to come to you so that you can also contribute to whatever white paper is being put together by the lawmakers in the National Assembly?
We will be open and appreciate any form of consultation with us. We will then share our experiences and offer our expertise on this. And I once again want to thank you for this invitation to this platform, that we will continue to assist fellow Namibians to address their own issues, such as the affordable land and affordable housing in Namibia.
Mr. Amushila, for the time that you gave us there, we do appreciate you, and do have a very productive remainder of the day, sir.
Thank you, and blessed day to you too.
That's right. That's Mr. Heinrich Amushila there speaking with us. Of course, he is the co-director of the Namibia Housing Action Group there. And then, of course, just a few minutes ago, we were with Salomo Hei, an economist right here in Namibia, and Mr. Herbert Jaunch. We're just closing up the conversation in the next 2 minutes there. So what is your final word, Mr. Jaunch? You are understood to be left-leaning expert here in Namibia. And can you have a conversation, people of your kind in Namibia who think the way you think, can you have a decent conversation with bankers?
It will be difficult because the interests are absolutely opposed. And it's group like the Shack Dwellers Federation, it's group like trade unions and workers, it's people who are homeless, people who are unemployed, that need to organize themselves. I believe very firmly in self-organization, because the elites locally, the political elite and the economic elite, as represented, for example, by banks and mining companies, are very well organized. And they find, of course, ways of influencing politicians, of bringing them on board. So those left out, those outside the boat, those swimming in the sea, need to realize that strong forms of organization, making their interests count and making sure that we see some social justice in our lifetime and not just the continuation of the status quo, will not happen unless those affected take their destiny into their own hand. Bob Marley once said, none but ourselves can free our minds. And I think this is a universal truth. And if the oppressed and suffering today wait for miracles from the tables of the elite, we're going to wait another 100 years. So they need to take their destiny into their own hands. And this example of banking and housing is just one example.
None but ourselves can free our minds. Is the Bank of Namibia really on course on freeing our minds and bringing about the kind of lifestyle that Namibians really deserve, where they do have access to housing without the impediment of very expensive financing or having a system or a situation that just makes it difficult for one to own a house? course. That's the conversation right here. On The Conversation, we are talking about this decision now by the Bank of Namibia that has been welcomed by some but has been criticized by others to scrap deposit payments for second-time homeowners, saying the move was long overdue. The question is, what about the first-time homeowners? There are a few seconds to go to 2 o'clock. It's been The Conversation right here on The Conversation, and we do appreciate you, Mr. Yok, for the time that you gave us there. We know that you're a family of Desert Radio. We do appreciate you. I don't know if you've heard that we will be on DSTV officially from the 1st of December. And of course, we are just spreading our wings much broadly there, and we do appreciate you constantly being part of this family.
Thank you so much, Kelvin.
That's right. The conversation continues right here, of course, on Desert Radio next week on Thursday, 1:15 until 2 o'clock every Monday, rather every Thursday, I should say. And then, of course, I'm always here, Breakfast in the Desert, every Monday to Friday from 6 o'clock until 9 o'clock. My name is Kelvin Chiringa. Have an awesome day.